Have you ever thought that Kagaya is a bit too nice? He sure likes to present himself as this loving figure who treats slayers as his own children, yet doesn't mind sending 3 groups of swordsmen to their deaths before involving some higher ranks. He's not stupid, and I dare say there is a sinister reason behind this move and many others. Hello comrade, my name is Mahis. Come, get yourself a beverage and sit down with me. We got a tinfoil hat to equip. Before we do that though, I must warn you about the dangers that lie ahead. This conspiratory effort requires all available information on the subject, so expect heavy character spoilers moving forward. Let me commence my fun little theory by clarifying that I don't consider the previous Oyakatsu-sama as bad in a general sense. He is still leading humanity towards a complete victory against the demonic threat, but while doing so, I think he wants to inflict the maximum amount of pain and suffering on everyone involved. That is an insane accusation, and in order for you to understand the inner machinations of my mind that led me to this crazy statement, we need to go back to where it all began. Weirdly enough, this information is not in the manga itself and is half from the Core Records book, half from the 2021 Demon Slayer exhibition. He had a rough childhood, even by this show's standards. When the master was only 4, his father, who was a sensitive man, couldn't stand the Slayers suffering injuries or dying any longer, leading him to sue a side character at the age of 19. Becoming the oldest living male Ubuyashiki, Kagaya had to pick up the pieces and oversee the core himself, but at least he had a mother and 2 younger brothers to help him along the way. Briefly, as when they were ages 9, 8 and 6 respectively, Senri, the middle child, decided to speedrun a house demolition by means of intentional incineration, taking the youngest son and the remaining parent with him. Kagaya would ultimately break his record in this category by a significant margin due to a new strat, yet until then, he single-handedly at first, and with Amane's help a few years later, managed the entirety of the organization as the Oyakatsu-sama is supposed to. Now tell me, dear comrade, is it or is it not reasonable to say that somebody with a background such as this can't be a normal person? Of course, this type of growing up environment will mess you up real good, and we saw it plenty of times with other characters. Sanemi became a spiteful dick, Giyu turned into comic and communicate but will cut your head off, and Tanjiro got so benevolent he began sympathizing with demons too. There are only 2 ways one can survive through such hardships with their wits and general personality intact. A path of extreme love or extreme hate, and I have several examples that suggest it's the latter. A loving leader will not send 3 squads of swordsmen to die at a singular point of interest. A kind person will not use their charm to recruit someone only to neglect their mental health later. And such a gentle individual would certainly not sacrifice his family just to talk shit to his archenemy. This last scene says it all. Kagaya literally pulled a nacho monologue out of his sickly ass, letting the true feelings he has been hiding for years out for all of us to see. Yeah, nobody other than Muzan ever learned this side of him, not for more than a few minutes anyway, and I'm positive that demons aren't the only ones he felt so strongly about. We'll go over these bullet points more in detail, as I'm going to cover all of them in a chronological-ish order after I state my hypothesis. Kagaya hates everyone. Slayers, demons, his own family, maybe except for Amane, since she's just a priestess who married and took care of him by her own volition. But the rest, demons have an obvious reason they started this whole shebang. Slayers are incompetent, a millennia has passed and they got nothing to show for it, sorry, wrong footage. Not to mention indirectly killing his father. Actually, the situation's gone worse, cause Sanemi mentioned how weak the average Slayer has become and that the demon attacks grow more frequent than they've ever been. As for his family, willingly or not, they all abandoned him, in charge of this clusterfuck of a situation. By the time he got to double-digit age, I bet he snapped just like Kanao, only adopting the "you're never fully dressed without a smile" policy and deciding to kill everyone with kindness in every sense of that expression. Although I say that and think of people like Shinjiro. If Kagaya is so good, and he is, at telling people what they want to hear and getting through to them no matter how angry, lost or resentful they are, why did he not help the existing members of the core with their inner demons? Rengoku's dad didn't become this way overnight. I mean, he kinda did, but not really. And it wouldn't have been too much to ask to invite him for a chat, to maybe tell him that the sun breathing isn't this be-all end-all, or that his victories do indeed have meaning. Again, Oyakatsu-sama is specifically described as borderline hypnotic with his speech, yet he never uses it outside trying to make others do what he wants. If you think that's a bunch of horseradish, explain to me why he decides to help Giyu only after the water Hashira started to show signs of quitting. He can't afford to lose him like Shinjiro, cause we are very close to victory, so he had no choice but to provide Tamioka with some mental help at the hands of Tanjiro. He's manipulating everyone by messing with their emotions, and if you pay close attention to that, you will notice it in almost every interaction. For example, his most quote-unquote difficult persuasion check, Sanemi, during his first Hashira meeting. Mr. Maxtabius had every right to be mad at him, because he's just sitting there safely giving away orders while his pawns do all the dirty work. Uyeshiki didn't deny, just smiled, said that he would have fought if not for the illness, and even went a step further by calling himself a pawn as well, because he too is replaceable. That rattled Shinazugawa a lot, since he expected an argument of some kind, and when the master nonchalantly brought up his dead friend's name, he lost all animosity towards him. Yet Kagaya didn't stop there. He needed to strike while the iron is hot and secure this kid as his loyal minion, so he did a bullshit no jutsu, producing Michika's will. What? A will? All the children write their own. When did that become a thing, and how? Is there like a monthly form you have to fill? Slayers die left, right, and center, suddenly after traveling around for God knows how long without returning to the HQ. Why did we never hear about this? None of the characters we know do that, and if anything, the only will we get is Urokadaki's, and they wipe their ass with it, Sanemi being the biggest hater. That's another point on his hypocrisy graph, by the way. This looks too convenient for this conversation, and I bet you a McMuffin, I don't have much more, that Kagaya wrote that will himself. He even says it, they're all more or less the same, and since there's no one to confirm the text on the count that the author is dead, it's a pretty good excuse. Do you know what makes a good lie/manipulation? Consistency, sure. But what about it being half true? Remember the pawn thing? I believe that he was telling the truth and that he does in fact consider everyone a pawn, including his own persona. You see, I meant it when I said Kagaya hates everyone. It's common for children to blame themselves for their parents canceling life subscription, and it's reasonable to assume that after his dad as well as brother made that decision, the poor kid felt responsible. He likely hates himself too, for his inability to prevent it all, for his body which is ill, for sending people to down missions, for his anger because he has to hide it. There are a bunch of reasons, and that's probably why he doesn't help others fix theirs. On top of that, it's just not beneficial for the Corps. There are too few members and too much ground to cover, so group tactics, as good as they are, will leave many parts of Japan unprotected. It's much better to have strong singular troops hunting demons, and in order to make them more efficient, you have to fuel their anger or at least keep it burning. If Kagaya used his gift to provide psychological help to his strongest warriors, it could have diminished their combat prowess. In Jujutsu Kaisen, for instance, Todo had a whole spiel about how enraging an opponent can lead to a swift loss, as emotions can both increase and decrease one's strength. Look at Muichiro, Obanai, or Shinobu. They're clearly suffering due to their traumas, and Oyakatsu-sama does nothing about it because it pushes them to grow stronger faster and because he can't take a chance on them getting softer. One exception to that is Gyomei, who does spend more time with him than the others, and it's by design. You need to have at least one subordinate you can trust to not only follow any command you issue, but to control others in your absence. We'll get to this last wish, so to speak. For now, we have to look at the first arc of the story, specifically the final selection, where we get introduced to his kids. Am I crazy for saying they act a little abnormal? An 8-year-old girl not reacting at all when grabbed angrily by her hair? She's just chilling, as if it's a regular fucking Tuesday. I'm not saying that Kagaya's household is hostile to the point where violence doesn't affect his kids anymore, yet without some Spartan regime, Kanata wouldn't have grown to be this stuff. I would have been more accepting of that if she was the only one behaving like this, but all his other children act more or less the same. Take the final battle. How does Kuina know to slap her brother to bring him back to his senses? Not to kick, not to punch, not to bite, but to slap with such perfect form, it would make the above-mentioned Todo proud. Yes, she felt bad afterwards and even cried, Still, somebody must have taught her in one way or another that if a person is in distress, not responding to normal means of communication, you have to use physical force to clear up their mind. Don't forget, we're talking about an 8-year-old kid who, to our knowledge, didn't have any world-shattering events happening to them and who was raised in a seemingly loving family. Not a normal family. They've been involved in some serious shit very early into their lives, which must have contributed to the way they act. Nevertheless, this alone won't make you not flinch when exposed to violence, so I'll let you draw your own conclusions. A few arcs later, our squad arrives at Mount Natagumo, where at least 3 groups of Slayers were sent to their doom. The reason I bring it up thrice now is because none of this makes sense from any point of view. Let's begin with the lore version of Kagaya. He's smart, even tactical at times, and values the lives of all Slayers. Sure, the first squad going silent is forgivable, as he didn't know how strong the demon living there is. Yet what about the second or the third hunting party? Murata's unit is hardly significantly stronger than the first, so what was the point of sending them and later Tanjiro with friends, who on paper are even weaker and as the story showed, would have also died if not for the backup? That's insanity, stupidity, and or cruelty, which doesn't satisfy the lore-given description of the master. Another option is that he is evil and wants Slayers to suffer. Why then send the second squad, RMCs, and the Hashiras in such quick succession that they end up meeting and saving each other? Or what if he wanted to deal with this threat ASAP and just send everyone available? That's still nonsense and counterproductive, since 2 pillars would have cleaned up the house way better than all those lower ranks combined. Also, notice how Giyu and Shinobu weren't rushing from their previous assignments, nor were picked because they're the closest. No, they were both at the Ubuyashiki mansion to begin with, which is strange considering how busy the Hashiras should be. It would have required at least a day or so to notify and let them arrive here, so it's very sketchy that they weren't sent to Mount Natagumo directly and instead were wasting time keeping Kagaya company. I think it's all to do with foresight. We never get it explained, but it seems to be able to provide him with general intel like time periods, as well as specific info like names, which we'll mention in a bit. No way to know what kind of extra knowledge he had on this place. Yet I can't help but wonder if he knew that this will be a place of some kind of breakthrough where a Slayer will unlock the power they need to kill Muzan. Say he got a vision of Mount Natagumo and a young unknown swordsman who is supposed to be defeating the big bad. He doesn't know who, doesn't know when, maybe even how, and because of that, he's like random bullshit go and sends everyone available there. Obviously, he can't just let the chosen one die, so he kept a few Hashiras around in case it started to look too dire. This will satisfy the lore-friendly version of Kagaya and my insane theory a bit, since he still allowed a lot of Slayers to die in several horrific ways. Next, we have the meeting at the mansion. Not going to repeat myself about the whole subordination thing with him letting Hashiras act out of line, and we'll go straight to him using manipulation on Tanjiro. As I said before, he agrees with the narrative provided, Nezuko is not bad, gives our boys something he agrees with, that some Hashiras are unconvinced, and then drops a nuke which will play right into his character, asking him to defeat 12 moons. Naturally, Mr. Kamado won't refuse, and thanks to his overachieving attitude, will suggest going further to defeat Kibutsuji, which allowed Kagaya to tone it down and task him with killing at least a moon first. In comparison to the Demon Daddy, it sounds way more doable, so everyone is taking it well, yet stop and think about it for a second. Tanjiro is still weak, and the master just gave him a Hashira level job. Without all this fluff and reinforcing that the pillars are stronger, it would have been an outrageous request, which could have upset some of them, cause here's the schmuck nobody knows about, and he suddenly gets top tier assignments from the Oyakatsu-sama himself? I'd be totally pissed, but thanks to his impeccable skills, Kagaya recruited Tanjiro and motivated him, as well as let Sanemi prove himself wrong and re-establish the master as the authority. Classic triangulation. Created tension, allowed everyone to express themselves, and capitalized on all of them. Unlike most manipulators, he's using these tactics for the greater good, so it doesn't look as bad. Oh, and I almost forgot about the bullshit no jutsu at the end to really get under his skin in a positive way. Ubuyashiki casually drops Lady Tamayo's name and tells our boy to send her his regards. What? So he knew about the rebel demon? I'm telling you, this foresight thing must be very powerful and specific, as how would you learn a name if it's just a hunch? He knows certain outcomes and what to do to achieve them, which would explain why his actions sometimes look too plot convenient. His foresight is not absolute though. Judging by his reaction to Daki's death, this was very unexpected, which is a little weird considering how monumental the achievement itself was, plus all the character growth we had. Tanjiro's sun breathing, Nezuko's transformation, Zenitsu slowly blurring the line between sleep and awake, as well as Inosuke setting up the transparent world. Why did this very important event never come up in his future telling endeavors? I suspect he had known that there was a strong demon and just didn't expect it to be an upper rank. Wait, the hell am I saying? Daki lived in Yoshiwara for generations, and together with Gyotaro, they killed more than 24 pillars. How could you have not known that there is something terrible lurking the streets of the entertainment district is beyond me. Unless, of course, he had this quest saved for that special someone, and Tanjiro killing the upper 5 without Kagaya personally sending him was the surprise that finally assembled the Muzan Destroyer puzzle. Your guess is as good as mine here, so let's continue with the next major dick move he pulled. It has to do with Gyomei, specifically the boss's final wish. There is a bit of a debate about what he said there exactly, and since I don't speak Japanese, I won't be able to settle this, so let's just use manga as the source. I really hope no more of my precious children will see death. Yeah, say that right before the decisive battle, during which Hashiras will have to at least use their marks, if not outright die to the sheer onslaught Muzan would unleash, is equivalent to farting before leaving an elevator. Gyomei is already 29, so activating a mark is likely to kill him shortly after the battle is over, and that's in the best case scenario. Why did he say that? And to his most loyal, most sensitive subordinate, who is likely to sacrifice himself before allowing his comrades to perish, which will also go against Kagaya's final wish. There is no way to fulfill it, and the anime version is even worse, where he directly asks the Stone Hashira to not let other slayers die. Thank you, Oyakatsu-sama. I'm about to engage in a battle deciding the future of humanity, and now I also need to make sure everyone lives through it. Post-production Mike is here. Gyomei has already failed to protect people he cared about in the past, which must be a huge traumatic memory. Asking him to not let this happen again is practically rubbing salt on wounds, and is exactly what an anime villain would do before unleashing his hordes on a city or something. Additionally, it's already a questionable thing to say before the final fight, yet consider if Kagaya knew about Kibutsuji's own trap. That would make this request diabolical, and I really hope that it was the case. Even his death was designed to cause as much pain to everyone as possible. Muzan got his pride hurt, Slayers became saddened and enraged thinking of him as a martyr, and his family got either killed or left in charge of the remaining battle. Think of poor Amane, you have to sit there waiting for your children to be sacrificed to wound the biggest of bads. Unlike Ubume, or Mrs. Gasai for that matter, she was a mother in the truest sense, even taking care of kids who aren't her own, and it most certainly caused her unimaginable grief, regardless of the "it's all for the greater good" stuff. Have you ever thought of the conversation they must have had in regards to this plan? Honey, you know of Muzan, right? This demon lord we have a generational feud with? Yes, what about him? I was thinking, what if, when he finally finds us, we have him come into our house without any resistance, talk to us for a bit, adding some dramatic suspense, and then boom, our entire budget explodes with him. Alright, fine, I knew this might happen, but at least our kids will be far away. And here's the best part. To really sell the idea that this isn't a trap, Hineki and Ichika will sing a song while playing ball right next to him. I can't even read this with a straight face, it's simultaneously so funny and extremely sad. The demon progenitor entered his mansion and came into the blast radius without seeing the kids or all this extracurricular stuff. If he didn't have time to react while the explosion was set right below him, I doubt standing 12 cowboy hats, or 5 meters for normal people, away would have changed much. There's literally no reason to have them around other than lighting the fuse at the correct time, which could have also been outsourced to at least a slayer who have dying in their job description. Nope. Kagaya said, screw everyone, I'm telling this self-absorbed, cowardly, off-brand Aizen, Michael Jackson-looking shitlord everything, and he is going to listen. The best way I can summarize his character is as someone I wouldn't think to be a psychopath, yet wouldn't be surprised to find out he was. With such a traumatic upbringing, the second last master of the mansion had all the makings of a cold, calculating and spiteful leader, yet instead, he's shown as compassionate, loving and serene. I think it's a facade, and that he uses it to achieve his goal of not only destroying demons for everything they've done, but to also torment slayers who allowed it all to happen. Notice how he mirrors his father? He probably hated him so much for pussing out that he decided to win by doing everything just like him, including purposefully sending core members to be slaughtered and using his own death as a catalyst, which is an ultimate middle finger to his dad. I know this is a huge speculation, but there's an expression in Russian, "В тихом омуте черти водятся," which is a negative version of "still waters run deep" and basically describes someone unassuming having a lot of skeletons in their closet. I even know an anime character that shares a lot of similarities with Kagaya and, as we see later into the story, supports my theory. The Golden Princess. Highly intelligent, perceived as the kindest person ever, as well as bound by an outside force. He by an illness and she by her status. If you ever want to see what would have happened if Ubuyashiki decided to join Muzan, I recommend watching Overlord, as Renair is a perfect parallel for him, with the exception of not using her abilities for the greater good. Iozai. Machias paying tribute by recording this while being sick into the microphone. Have a great, whatever time of the day you have. Until next time, cheers.